Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special Monday lightning round episode of 10-Minute Drill to break down exactly what happened on Sunday night when a handful of Democrats finally agreed to break the dam and reopen the federal government. We're going to talk about what happened, what happens next, and all the fallout that's coming from it today on 10-Minute Drill.
Everybody get up, get up.
The story of America is the story of an adventure.
I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you.
We are a nation under God, and I believe God intended for us to be free.
Last night after 11 p.m., the Senate voted to break the filibuster and begin reopening the federal government with a vote of 60-40. The deal that was struck with just a handful of Senate Democrats include a continuing resolution that will run through January 30th. The Senate Republican leadership agreed to hold a vote on an Obamacare premium subsidies bill of the Democrats' choosing by the second week in December. There are also multiple appropriations bills that will be included this week. There was an agreement on reversal of the shutdown layoffs that President Trump's administration carried out, and SNAP food stamps will be funded through the end of 2026. The biggest concession that Democrats are touting is that reversal in layoffs. The problem for Democrats is those layoffs only happened because of the government shutdown. So the reality is Democrats got nothing out of this. This is the same deal that Republicans had offered weeks ago. This shutdown was completely unnecessary, and the fallout for Democrats has already begun. But to understand what happened last night, let's go back a week. On Tuesday night, Democrats won major elections in Virginia, New Jersey, and perhaps most notably, the New York mayoral race. Part of the reason that's so notable is the New York Democrat candidate who won the mayoral race, Zohran was handpicked by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders. Now, AOC has been the primary aggressor against Senate Democrat leader Chuck Schumer. And many believe that the main reason that Democrats shut down the federal government was because Chuck Schumer was worried about a primary from AOC. Mondami winning the New York mayoral race on Tuesday likely gives a lot of strength to the Bernie AOC wing of the party, which does not help Chuck Schumer. But Politico reported that late last week, Democrats had been thinking about moving towards ending the shutdown. They had been discussing a path forward. And if you've listened to 10-Minute Drill, you know that we've been talking for a long time about the fact that at some point, Democrats will look for an off-ramp, a way to end this shutdown, knowing that they'll get nothing out of this. But they'll try and find ways to sort of put lipstick on a pig. But late last week, there were a number of Democrats that were starting to look for that off-ramp. And after the Tuesday elections, the Bernie wing of the party felt emboldened and shut that down. Here's what Politico reported. Some corners of the caucus believe Sanders and his allies, who have not participated in the bipartisan talks, are simply wanting to brawl with Republicans without having a realistic plan to bring the longest shutdown on record to an end. The progressives have yet to articulate any sense whatsoever of how they think this ends or any proposal to get Republicans to the table other than waiting longer and longer, said a Senate Democratic aide who granted anonymity to comment candidly about caucus dynamics. And in the meantime, it's the families who can afford it the least that are increasingly getting walloped by the shutdown. We're not going to get a better offer, another Democratic aide involved in the bipartisan talks added. So that frustration was boiling. And one tension that's always existed in the Democratic Party is the sort of Bernie versus the establishment wing. Now, the Bernie wing has been on the rise for the last several years as the party has shifted to the left. But a number of moderate or so-called moderate Democrats in the Senate have tried to resist that. And they understand the fact that Bernie has not ever been a part of a winning coalition, has not ever really sponsored legislation that's passed. He's just there to fight, and as this Democrat staffer said, brawl with Republicans. And so that tension continued to rise into the weekend. And also over the weekend, Senate Republican leadership announced that they would not close the Senate. They would continue holding votes and forcing the Senate to stay open until they reached a compromise. And that is a big part of how we got to this place. Another thing that happened late last week, though, was Chuck Schumer announced the Democrats' demand for a full one-year extension of subsidies, which led to this very heated exchange with Ohio Senator Bernie Moreno.
Have you put forward a proposal that we can read that you referenced in your speech, what says a clean continuing resolution with the extension of the ACA Biden COVID credits?
Yes, as we spoke yesterday, there is a proposal that is very simple, because we have two sentences we would add to any proposal, which would extend the ACA benefits for 1 year. That's all.
It still have no income caps, so people who make $1 million, $2 million, $3 million a
As
year?
we said, if he would have listened to my speech yesterday, once we pass the 1 year fix, so people right now aren't in difficulty, we would sit and negotiate that.
People making millions of dollars would still receive these COVID-era subsidies?
The bottom line is I know that the senator from Ohio cares about the billionaires. We care about average working people. I yield the floor.
So just to be clear, Mr. President.
Was recognized.
So just to be clear, what you heard from the minority leader was the following. I just want to recap it for those of whom might have missed. He acknowledged that his plan would be to allow millionaires, let me just say that clearly, people making millions of dollars would receive Biden-era COVID Obamacare subsidies.
What's notable in that exchange is Schumer's essentially pulling the Pelosi, we have to pass this to find out what's in it. By Schumer saying we will pass this and then talk about things like income caps after it's gone on for another year, they're acknowledging the fact that these income caps are highly unpopular. And if, again, you've listened to 10 Minute Drill, we've talked about the fact that as this shutdown goes on, more people are learning about how terrible these pandemic Obamacare subsidies actually are, because the overwhelming bulk of them goes to families that are making a lot of money. We talked about the case of a family that makes $600,000 a year in Arizona qualifying for these taxpayer-funded subsidies. And as people have learned more about that, particularly after Chuck Schumer demanded a full 1 year extension of these without any kind of hearings, process, or examination, people got a little bit more skittish about that. And that exchange between Schumer and Moreno got a lot of attention on social media, and the fact that Chuck Schumer could not defend their position at all. Last thing that we'll talk about in this lightning round today is the fallout for Schumer. Now, if you thought that the vitriol for Schumer was bad after they passed a simple continuing resolution 6 months ago, imagine how much worse it's going to be that he led them into this shutdown, drove them off of a cliff, got the entire base rallied for this, and then essentially the Democrats in the Senate agreed to reopen the government with nothing to show for it. They fired everyone up and eventually just said, okay, fine, we'll reopen with the same continuing resolution we had before. Ro Khanna, House Democrats, already saying, Senator Schumer's no longer effective and should be replaced. If you can't lead the fight to stop healthcare premiums for skyrocketing for Americans, what will you fight for? Gavin Newsom tweeted, pathetic. This isn't a deal, it's a surrender. Don't bend the knee. Expect to see more and more vitriol from the Democrat base that never needed to happen. If Chuck Schumer and Democrats had simply passed the continuing resolution in the beginning and never shut down the government, people would have been mad for a few minutes, but they can argue shutdowns never win, they're unpopular, and they could have lived to fight another day. But this strategy was the worst possible way to engage in this, and they're going to continue to have pitchforks out for them. Again, the great genius of Chuck Schumer. That is all the time we have for today's quick lightning round episode. Again, we'll have a full episode for you tomorrow, diving in deeper into all of these things, but didn't want to leave you hanging getting back into the week knowing that we had finally had this massive breakthrough. Have a great day.